everybody, and welcome to another Agile IT Tech Talk. I'm your host, Sean Spicer, and today we're going to be talking about Microsoft Defender ATP. So we've talked about Azure ATP, which defends our cloud infrastructures and virtual machines. And we've talked about Microsoft Defender ATP, which defends our endpoints, so our laptops, our desktops, antivirus, mobile. So Microsoft Defender ATP is now out in public preview on Android. So that's pretty cool. But today we're talking about Office 365 ATP, which defends your Microsoft 365 environment, including SharePoint, Teams, and Exchange. We're going to cover Exchange Online Protection that stops malware and phishing. We're going to talk about anti-spoofing, sandboxing, safe attachments in OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. And we'll cover some of the reporting capabilities that are built into the platform. So let's get started. So Exchange Online Protection is the cloud-based filtering service that protects your organization against spam and malware. EOP is included in all Microsoft 365 offerings with Exchange Online mailboxes. EOP begins filtering spam and malware from the moment your tenant is enabled and you begin receiving email. So to get started, you want to open the Security and Compliance Center. And the settings for EOP and Office 365 ATP can be found in the Threat Management module. So today, she's not getting fired, but we're going to be Megan Bowen, and we're going to look at how the Security and Compliance Center helps protect her organization. So the first thing we do is we go to Threat Management, and EOP uses signature-based AV engines to protect against inbound and outbound malware. And we can configure that here in policies. So the multi-engine approach provides significantly more protection than using just one anti-malware engine. Behind the scenes, Microsoft's anti-malware team maintains close relationships with partners like us who develop anti-malware engines, not like us. As a result, the service can receive and integrate malware definitions and patches before they're even publicly released. This gives outstanding zero-day protections. So we configure that here in anti-malware. And now malware filtering is automatically enabled in your tenant via the default anti-malware policy. However, as an administrator, you can view and edit the default anti-malware policies, but it is important to know that you can't delete it. So here you can see the default policy. We can go ahead and click it. And then we've got settings. So when malware is detected in an attachment, the entire message, including the attachment, is quarantined. By default, users aren't notified when this happens, but you do have the ability to change the detection response setting so that users are automatically notified using either a default response or one you create yourself. So here you can see that you've got the custom notification text, as well as you can choose the type of response you want. So do you want to notify no, yes, and use default, yes, and use custom? So you also have the ability to block specific file types and notify senders when message delivery has been blocked using default or customized text. One thing to know about this is that when certain threats increase in volume, they will add new types into this file type. And this caused a problem about a year and a half ago when there were numerous no-code exploits utilizing PowerShell scripts, and they blocked the ability to send PowerShell scripts. It makes sense. You don't usually have people sending PowerShell scripts back and forth. But if you have a team of developers that do send PowerShell scripts back and forth, it can cause an issue. So if you do start seeing, and I'll show you how to look at your quarantine box in a little bit. If you do start seeing an increase in quarantine types or mail not going through, this is really the first place you want to check. Or you can honestly normally just do a Google search or a Bing search for the Microsoft site and do a search for Office ATP file types, and you'll see news where they will announce when they do these blocks. So if an admin decides to delete a message after inspecting it, you can configure the policy so the sender is notified that their message wasn't delivered. So checking notify internal senders, this enables notifications to internal senders that their email had malware in it. You can also configure this policy so that the admin is notified when messages aren't delivered and customize the notification message that is sent to the sender and an administrator. I'm not going to get into a conversation right now about alert fatigue. This creates alert fatigue. So let's go ahead and create a new policy. So you can create custom malware filter policies and apply them to specific users, groups, or domains in your organization. It doesn't take a lot of thought to think about certain groups that may not be technically savvy, where you want more nuance or want more control, or where you have more savvy users where you want to give a little bit more information in the notification text. While custom policies always take precedence over the default policy, you can change the priority and the execution order of your policies. So to manage spam policies, we're going to want to go to the anti-spam section on the policy page. On the anti-spam setting page, you can see all the policies that are already enabled by default to help protect against spam, or at least most spam. And these policies will apply to all users and domains in your tenant. So here's the default. So if you want more control, you can create a policy and customize the new anti-spam policy to meet the needs of your organization. Policies let you create multiple spam filters to apply differing levels of filtering aggressiveness to specific domains, users, or groups of users. The application scope will become available when you create more than one spam filter. So you can see up here is the ability to create a policy. And alternatively, you can edit default spam policies to best meet the needs of your organization. So Exchange Online Protection gives you the option to handle high confidence spam differently from spam with a lower score. The options are shown in the drop-down menu. So the first option, move messages to junk email folder, provides the best end experience for recipients, which in turn usually means less demand on your IT support team. Recipients have greater control over their own spam preferences, including safe and block listing. However, upstream administrative block list rules still take precedence. So if you choose to mark the messages with an X header or prepend a subject, you need to have a downstream method to handle detected spam. For example, you can use an X header text as an identifier to create transport rules to filter or route messages as needed. Note that should you choose to delete the message by choosing the delete the message option, you will not be able to recover those deleted messages. Strongly suggest against this. If you've ever gone head to head with a CEO asking why he didn't get an email from his buddy who has a very spammy email address, or their server has a very low send rank, you want to be able to get those emails. Don't delete. I would recommend quarantining. And that's it. You can also choose to redirect spam to the quarantine. Now, while admins can search for and manage quarantine messages for all users, end users can work with their own filtered message in quarantine, provided that you've set up end user spam notifications. So the select the threshold, setting here is specific to bulk email. Bulk email can be tricky since these items are typically benign marketing messages that users may have actually signed up to receive. For example, if you've listened to our podcast, our first episode, we talked about Voices for Innovation. Every Thursday, every Friday, I am looking for the VFI email. It's got great information in it. I like it, but it is a bulk email and quite often winds up going out of my focused inbox or sometimes even into spam. So depending on your company's policy towards bulk email, admins can assign a threshold between 1 and 9 to bulk email and identifying it. The higher the number, the less bulk email is marked as spam. The lower the threshold, the more bulk email is marked as spam. However, this can increase the chance that what mail users want to be delivered will be marked as spam. To avoid this, users can add these senders to their safe senders list in Outlook, or OA, Outlook on the web. So here you can see the list of numbers. 7 is actually a pretty good number. However, you really want to look at your user experience. And if people are complaining about being bombarded with spam, you will probably want to lower that number and make it a little bit more restrictive. It's a balancing act. So safety tips is a new feature that Microsoft has added to warn users when they receive an email that has been identified as suspicious. Safety tips in Outlook and Outlook on the web help alert end users to messages that are potentially unsafe. This is a valuable feature because even when Exchange Online Protection detects that a message really is phish and it will be sent to a user's junk folder, end users will sometimes reply to those messages out of their junk mail folder and even open support tickets and report those messages as false positives. To reduce this, Microsoft wants to make sure that users understand better why messages are filtered so they can be more cautious. You've probably seen this with Teams, or if you have any third-party SaaS applications that mail on behalf of the user, you'll get the little header up top that says, warning, this is being sent from somewhere outside of your organization, identifying itself as someone you've communicated with before. This was when it first came out, this was a really big problem with DocuSign. All my DocuSigns were getting thrown to spam. So people had to notify me if they were sending me a DocuSign. And I also had to set up rules to recognize that. Then there is international spam controls. So EOP provides the ability to mark messages sent in other languages spam. This is something you might turn on if you don't expect legitimate email written in other languages. Likewise, you can classify messages coming from certain countries, TLDs, top-level domains, as spam. So here you can set filter email messages written in the following language. And likewise, you can classify messages coming from certain countries' top-level domains as spam. And then finally, spam properties. Under spam properties are the advanced settings available to dial up the aggressiveness of the spam filtering. EOP is effective against spam in default configurations, so it's recommended you run the service this way at first. When you're first starting out, you don't really need to get in here and change everything around. If you find that the service isn't effective and you are getting complaints, you are getting bombarded with spam, you can try turning on the more aggressive advanced options. So the first of the four options under increase spam score will increase the spam score for a matching message, which may cause it to be scored as spam. The options found under mark as spam will guarantee that a matching message is scored as spam. So for organizations particularly concerned about phishing and spoofing, this is recommended to make a change. Hard fail for SPF and conditional sender ID filtering will make sure that nobody can send into your company using your domain. And we'll get into spoofing protections in a little bit in this presentation. But this is if you are getting just bombarded with executive email attacks or executive email spoofing and scams where perhaps you get an executive assistant gets an email from the CEO saying to go buy 100 target cards, which is a common attack. This will block out anything that doesn't have the proper SPF record. And finally, you can also turn on most options in test mode, which lets you see when the matches happen in order to make sure that your policies are working correctly or will work correctly. So once we've set the spam filter policies, we can turn on and set notification intervals by clicking Configure End User Spam Notifications in the summary of the policy. There it is. So here we can set the interval and select preferred notification language from within the dropdown. Note that ESNs can't be used with policies applied to users or groups or to a policy with exceptions. So you can also customize the connection filter settings. Connection filtering checks the IP reputation of the sender before allowing a message to get through. And I've talked about sender score just a minute ago. This is, if you are in a marketing department, I doubt you're probably watching this presentation, watching this demo. But if you're in a marketing department, if you send a lot of emails, you are probably familiar with domain score and sender score. Really fun thing, Google Sender Score, there's a number of places that will do the report, but it will give a report on your domain or your email IP address and give you the amount of spam that is sent from it. It can be very surprising. And if suddenly no other company outside your organization is getting any of your emails, that might be the problem. I've run into that twice in my career now. It is not fun. So let's go ahead and look at the connection filter policies here. We're going to go ahead and edit the policy. So we can create an allow or safe sender list to make sure we receive every message sent from a specific IP address or an IP address range. Also, you can create a list of IP addresses from which to block messages. So you've got your clean filter here, always accept messages from the following IP addresses. You can edit your allow list, and then always block messages from the following IP addresses, IP block list. Because you can't possibly identify every IP address, you have the option to check this safe list setting, which is a growing list of trusted IP addresses that Microsoft receives from various third-party sources of trusted senders. So let's look at outbound spam filter policy. So the outbound spam filter policy can be modified so people are notified when internal users send something outside the tenant that looks suspicious and when they're blocked from sending outbound spam. This is important because this can be an indicator of a breached account. I got a very obvious PDF invoice phishing email from one of our clients about 6 months ago. And I knew the client, I worked with the CEO, and I immediately took a screenshot of it, did not forward it because I didn't want to send around bad attachments, but I took a screenshot of it, I sent it to the CEO and I said, hey, this doesn't look right. I think you might have a breached account. And sure enough, they had a breached account and we had a lot of work to do to get them set up in order to protect their environment. And of course, the first thing, you hear me say it over and over again, multi-factor authentication. So let's go ahead and edit the outbound spam filter policy and see what notifications are possible and how this works. So notifications, you can send a copy of suspicious outbound email to specific people. This would probably be your admin if you have a security operations team, might be there. Notify specific people if a sender is blocked due to sending outbound spam. So here you can set the maximum number of recipients per user. So if somebody does manage to breach an account or figures out some way to spoof into your email sending domain, you can go ahead and control how many emails someone can send. So you don't want somebody sending an email to 20,000 people in the address or in the toolbar. You also don't want somebody to just start pumping out emails through some sort of a script for the same reason. And action when user exceeds the specified limits, you can restrict the user, you can block the user from sending any email, or you can provide notifications to the team above. So with spoof intelligence, Microsoft provides insight into senders who are spoofing your domain. To view these spoofers sending, excuse me, the senders that are spoofing your domain, you can just come through. It'll show you all senders that you've already reviewed or review new senders. And the sender is usually the domain from which the spoof email originates. If the domain can't be identified, then the IP address is displayed. So you've got setting infrastructure. So this will include the name of the user who is spoofed or more than one if the sender spoofed multiple users. You've got you can also look at the number of messages, which shows the number of spoofed messages, the number of complaints end users reported by clicking the link in their junk folder, and the option to allow or block the sender from spoofing. If the sender is spoofing multiple users, they'll be listed in the detail blade in individual rows, so you can choose whether to allow or block the sender from spoofing each user individually. To add a sender to the allow list for a user, just click yes from the allow to spoof column. And to add a sender to the block list for a user, choose no. This is where we run into things like DocuSign or HubSpot that's sending, or actually Google does it for me because I use Google Analytics. Google will send me reports that say that they're from me, and Microsoft does not like that. And if we were in our domain, we could see that and we could allow those to do it. Honestly, it's not that big of a deal with the default settings in Exchange Online Protection. The users will see these in their junk folder and they can go ahead and they can say, hey, this isn't junk, this is why. So if you previously reviewed users and want to change any of your previous choices, you can also choose show me the senders I've already reviewed instead. So one of the caveats to any sandbox solution like this is the latency involved in performing the scan and analysis. Typically, this results in a delay of less than a minute, but there are occasions when it can be longer. One of the key differentiators in Office 365 ATP, as the mailboxes are in Microsoft 365, is the ability to strip out the attachments for detonation while continuing with the delivery of the rest of the message body to the recipient. This is called dynamic delivery. Now, dynamic delivery helps to ensure that you're protected while continuing to be productive by letting you read and respond to the message while the attachment is being scanned. In addition, most PDFs and Office documents can be previewed within Outlook or ALA while ATP scanning is underway. And if attachment isn't compatible with the dynamic delivery previewer for some reason, recipients will see the attachment placeholder until that scanning is complete. In this example, Megan's sending a message with a malicious attachment. Oh, there we go. We're going to fire Megan again. And let's see what happens. So when Alex receives the message, he's informed that the attachment is in the process of being scanned. But in the meantime, he's still able, to look and read the message body. He's also able to preview the attachment in safe mode. After the scan is complete, the malicious attachment is removed and replaced with an explanation for the reader about why it was removed. So you can see unsafe attachments blocked. Your attachments were found to be unsafe. The following attachments were found to be unsafe, and why. Trojan, Win32, Advanced Threat Protection file. And you can go and you can read documentation on that as well. This is a place where notification would be nice to go to the admins. So Microsoft provides support for safe attachments, not just in Outlook, but also in SharePoint Online, OneDrive, and Teams to enable users to collaborate in a safer manner by preventing people from opening or downloading malicious files. So sharing any file initiates a scanning process, and when detected, ATP blocks the file. And depending on how the admin configured it, prevents users from taking any action on the file. Oh, here we go. So tall order win contract, you can see that that was blocked. You can see who modified it and shared it. Megan Bowen, gonna get fired again. So let's take a look at some examples of the Safe Links experience. You've probably seen a lot of this. So Alex gets this email with the subject cheap flights from an external sender. In this message about cheap flights, he clicks a link which unknown to him is actually a phishing link. The organization's Safe Links policy detected the link and it's found to be malicious. Subsequently, Alex is redirected to a block screen, which alerts him about the classification of that URL, and Alex can feel secure knowing he's been protected because Safe Links policies are in place. So in Microsoft 365, ATP is integrated with all your Office applications, so you're protected whether you're using the applications installed on your computer or Office Online. Now, this was a question that came up from one of our YouTube viewers the other day, and I hope this clarifies for him. So here we're going to go ahead and open the file, and after reading through, we're going to want to learn more about the cost summary. So cost estimate summary comes, see Excel. So behind the scenes, SafeLink checks the URL against Microsoft's database list of malicious URLs and determines that it's unsafe, displaying a message in Alex's browser warning him of the threat. This link was not in the email. The link was in a document. So again, the SafeLinks is not just in email. It's across all of Office 365. That's why this is Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection and not just Outlook security. So Office 365 ATP extends the protection provided by Exchange Online Protection to protect you against advanced threats such as zero-day attacks, which involve unknown malware, targeted phishing or whaling campaigns, ransomware, and malicious URLs. By using a combination of machine learning, traditional use to clustering, activity events, and statistical analysis, files and attachments that are suspicious are routed through a hypervisor environment where they are detonated and analyzed for behavior, specifically malicious behavior. So with safe attachments, you can protect users from opening or downloading malicious content in SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams by simply toggling a checkbox. Safe attachment policies can be configured to protect users from malicious file attachments in email. And a safe attachment policy can be configured to monitor, block, or replace attachments that are found or contain malware. Or you can choose dynamic delivery as we looked at earlier. Monitor will deliver the message immediately, then track what happens to it. Probably a bad idea. Block prevents the entire message, including the message body and attachment, from being delivered. And replace delivers the body of the message with an explanatory placeholder instead of the attachment. All of these options are supported both on premises and in the cloud. And here you can see those different settings. For recipients with mailboxes hosted in the cloud, dynamic delivery functions like replace, but without the latency. It allows the body of the email to go straight to the recipient with a placeholder attachment, while the actual attachment goes through the scanning process in the sandbox environment. If the attachment is cleared, it replaces the placeholder, and if not, the admin can filter out unwanted and potentially malicious attachments. If desired, you can also have attachments redirected to a specific email address for further investigation. The Applied To settings list lets you set conditions and exceptions specifying which users, groups, or domains the policy will apply to. So if the recipient domain is a member of, then we can go ahead and add conditions, and we can add exceptions as well. And those exceptions can be both users and groups. So let's go ahead and go back to policies here. So the Safe Links feature in ATP scans messages like we've seen and detects malicious URLs like those from phishing scams. Safe Links checks the URLs in real time at the time of the click against a database of malicious websites that is updated approximately about every 20 minutes. When a user clicks a hyperlink embedded in email or Office or PDF files, the link is checked against this list. If the link isn't on the list, it gets rewritten so that users are redirected to a protective shell and notified that the original URL has been classified as malicious. This is live filtering. So by default, customers who have ATP will have ATP SafeLinks policy already defined that applies to everyone in the organization. You can't delete the policy, but you can edit it. For instance, SafeLinks for Office 365 apps is turned off by default, but in this tenant, you can see where it's enabled. To apply SafeLinks protections to recipients, groups, or domains, you create additional policies in the policies that apply to specific users section. So for instance, safe links for Office 365 apps is turned off by default, but in this tenant, you can see where it's enabled. And that's here. To apply safe links protection to recipients, groups, or domains, you create the policies in the policies that apply to special users, and that's here. And this is the recipient safe links policy. We'll take a look at that. We'll look at settings. And here you can see select actions. Let's see. Do not track, do not let users click through to original URL. So do not track when users click safe links is not set. This will allow admins to gain insight into those clicks. Also, do not let users click through safe links to the original URL is set for optimum protection. So you've probably seen this on your personal browsers where you have the ability to go to the website anyway. You can go ahead and unclick this and they can do that. Again, it's a bad idea. If they really need to get there, this is one of those cases where would you rather have a ransomware attack or a trouble ticket? I have encountered websites where because they are hosted in Eastern European countries, I can't visit them. And I have had to go to IT and say, hey, listen, this is a valuable resource I need. Can you go ahead and whitelist that? And that's where we had the exceptions earlier. So phishing attacks come in a bunch of different forms. So from commodity-based attacks that just everybody gets to targeted spear phishing or whaling. And whaling is where they specifically look for high-value targets. A little bit of news from 2 weeks ago, there was a group out of North Korea that was sending job listings to high-level technical positions at not just Bitcoin, but all blockchain and cryptocurrency companies. And they would look at the user's LinkedIn profile, create a job listing that makes it look like it's ideal for them with an outrageous salary and say, hey, can I send you this job description? We're looking for somebody who matches your experience. When they would go in and click it, it had a macro that made it look like it was using data loss protection policies and said that macros needed to be enabled for them to be able to read it. And when they clicked enable macros, they were phished, they were breached, and people had access into their account and their environment. So while EOP provides basic protection against most phish, ATP anti-phishing policies give you advanced protection from other phishing attacks, in particular domain impersonation. So that's a CEO asking for 100 Target gift cards and user impersonation. So let's see what that looks like. So here we have a domain impersonation policy. And as you set up and edit the policies, you can choose from a bunch of different options. So policy setting, domain impersonation. And then we have the impersonation settings here. Let's go ahead and edit a couple of those. So along with entering a name and a description, you're prompted to add the users to protect. This page here lets you add users who you want to protect from being impersonated by a hacker and is usually a person or persons in key roles such as a CEO or CFO. So let's go ahead and add domains to protect. This allows you to add domains that you want to protect from being impersonated. By default, domains that you own are automatically included. This setting helps to ensure that mail from outside your organization is an impersonation of one of the domains defined in your list of verified domains or that of a partner domain. The actions section here lets you choose the actions to take when an impersonation attempt is detected against the users that you've already added to the policy up here. You can choose different actions for users and domains in the same anti-phishing policy. The policy is set to quarantine the message, this one, if it was sent by an impersonated domain. And then you can set the action if the email is sent by an impersonated domain, quarantine the message. You get the different options: redirect message to other email addresses, move message to junk, deliver the message and add other addresses to the BCC line, or delete the message before it's delivered, or just don't do anything. This page also lets you turn on phishing safety tips for end users who receive an email where impersonation has been detected. This tip is useful for educating users on the risks of phishing attacks. So this turn on impersonation safety tips is going to be what I was talking about, where I was getting warned whenever I would get DocuSigns. So show tips for impersonated users, show tips for impersonated domains, show tips for unusual characters. You can go ahead and set these tips for everything. Now, the unusual characters, that's interesting because a lot of times what they will do for phishing is they will use different Unicode characters in order to, it will be a Cyrillic R instead of a lowercase r, and they'll register that domain, and it's totally allowed. And then they can send email from that domain, and it would look like Microsoft, but it's Mike Cyrillic R Osoft. So this is something that usually can't be seen. I strongly recommend turning that on. Normally, that will be detected by your default phishing policies, as well as spam policies, but it is still one of those things to take into account and is very useful to inform and train your users about. Next is mail intelligence, which enhances the services by analyzing mail flow patterns to determine which contacts users communicate with the most often. In turn, this helps the service to more easily identify when a message might be from an attacker who's impersonating one of those contacts. Again, going back to the DocuSign, is there are specific people I email all the time? When they would send me DocuSigns, it would go and say, hey, this might be spam. We can go ahead and add trusted senders and domains. Here, we'll just add the entire domain, DocuSign.com. Don't always recommend doing that. DocuSign is fairly trusted, though. And messages from sender email addresses and domains that you add as trusted senders and domains won't ever be classified as an impersonation-based attack. This is useful when users interact with domains or users that trigger impersonation, but are actually considered to be safe. For example, if a partner has the same or similar display name or domain name as a user defined on the list. I don't want to get too long-winded. It is possible to use alternative characters in order to spoof through third-party accounts like DocuSign. That's why it is not always suggested to go ahead and just whitelist everybody. Go ahead and leave those tips in place to make sure that your users are being informed. And finally, the applied to settings let you associate the policy with users, groups, and domains. Now let's look at some reporting. So previously, email was sent to a user and it was designed to trigger domain impersonation protection. The policy is configured to allow viewing this email in quarantine. And so here's under threat management, review, and then you've got the action center, quarantine, and restricted users. So let's go ahead and look at the quarantine section here. The email using a similar domain is listed here, and you can see pretty quickly what was done here. So from this list, the admins can release the message to the user, release and send a report, or simply delete. You can also view details associated with the message, as well as looking at headers. There's also the preview message that's sent to the user, including the safety tip settings enabled in the policy. So back in the Security and Compliance Center, admins can review reports that track suspicious messages and URLs in a lot more detail. So let's do a trace. So the message trace feature tracks messages based on administrator and entered criteria, including date ranges, delivery status, message ID, and email addresses. When we did the work on doing forensics using Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection, we did show where you could backtrack into this framework when doing a forensic analysis of an attack. So here you can see the timeline up to 90 days, and then to these people, and then sent by these people. So within here, you can filter based on groups as well as users. So let's go ahead and take a look at this Alex Wilbur guy. and we're set for 7 days. We're going to set some more search options. Let's see, delivery status, okay, has been delivered. And let's search. Searches may take anywhere from a few minutes to several hours before a message trace returns results. This is a demo tenant, so it's fast. So under sender, we can see Contoso deals, cheap flights. We saw that earlier. And then we can see message events. Event, advanced threat, malware, defer because it was going through the ATP detonation. And so this gives everything that occurred from the time the email was received to the time it was actually placed in the mailbox. And it will give you more information here to explain it and what was going on. But you can see the message was delivered to the recipient's inbox folder. So with real-time ATP reports, customers have visibility into all malicious emails that targeted the tenant and were blocked by Office 365. So the malware report for email shows admins your incoming and outgoing email that has been classified as malware. By default, this report shows data for the past 7 days. This enables you to act quickly, but you can use the date filters to change the date range as well. Below the chart in the email list, you can go ahead and click these items to view more information such as details, attachments, similar email messages, which is used to identify campaigns, and advanced analysis information for each information listed in the report. So we've got the summary of the email here. We check out details. You can see the original IP address it was sent, what the threats were that were contained, how it was detected. So anti-malware engine, it detected malware, advanced phish filter. It meant that that email was part of a larger campaign, possibly within or outside of your domain. Usually that's coming, including attacks on other Microsoft customers. You can look at the attachments and what the SHA-256 hash was for it. That's how they can identify that when they're similar. And you can see what the malware family that is there. Then over in similar emails, you can see where somebody else got it. So here you've got the sender. It was the same IP. It looks like just this person got it over and over and over again. So admins that use ATP can also see all emails that have been flagged and submitted by their end users as potential threats. I'm probably a nightmare for this one because I junk everybody. I get so much spam now. With the user reported threats view, admins can identify the sender of the email, the number of instances of the email, and the number of users who received the email. So we'll go ahead and we will look at the malware tab here. And we can see what's been submitted. So the ability to view emails submitted by end users is a valuable tool because it empowers your security teams to work with your users to identify malicious emails and trigger investigations on potential threats and impacts. The combination of these reports provides your admins and security teams a comprehensive view of the breadth and depth of different malware and phishing campaigns targeting your organization. So you can see, was it malware submissions or phishing? So the real-time reports surface only when customers have ATP standalone subscriptions. If you have E5 or standalone threat intelligence, you'll get the full threat intelligence offering and related experiences, including this threat explorer. So this has been an overview and walkthrough of Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection. With this, we have now done 3 of the major ATP platforms and showing how they all work together. Thank you very much for joining us. I have a surprise. I am finally getting back up from the rest of the company, and we're going to get some extra hosts in here to help me out. So next week, we're going to be joined by Paul Zorio, who is he started about 2 weeks after I did here at the company and has just moved into a new engineering position here. And he'll be explaining the process of enabling combined registration for self-service password resets, SSPR, and multi-factor authentication. The following week, Kristen San Ramon, who's done a number of tech talks with me in the past, as well as with a number of Microsoft architects, will be showing off how to unlock all the power in Teams chats. I know you think Teams chats are just chatting back and forth, but you can add tabs and files. I use it as a great way to do ad hoc groups. In fact, I am organizing my Tech Talk team using a chat because it isn't something that needed to be a channel, and it's something that drew outside of individual teams because we've got productivity, we've got product managers, we have account reps, and then finally Christy Guy will be covering commercial Microsoft 365 licensing, and we'll be working to unwinding all of the changes we've seen this year, and probably going to find out how to save some money on that one. Once again, thanks for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and follow. What follows is a open Q&A session after we stop recording. If you do want to ask questions online, feel free to do so in the comments. Sometimes it takes me a week or two to get back in there because I don't live on YouTube, but I do try to answer everything. Thank you very, very much, and we'll see you next week.